What's up guys, welcome to the video. Today we're going to be doing the highly requested how will the teams fare in the new meta come stage 2. As I said, this video has been requested by a lot of you guys. Everybody's wondering how the teams will stack up on the new meta, specifically since there is going to be less Mercy. I mean a lot less Mercy. She's basically nerfed to the ground. So we're going to cover every single team. Since there are 12 teams, I'm going to try to do every team in about under a minute. So if you guys are excited for this video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to my channel. I do Overwatch League content every single day. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. We're going to go off the standings, starting with the number 1 team, New York Excelsior. The New York Excelsior definitely used the Mercy meta to their advantage. With Arc running on that Mercy, he was very good, and Jonak obviously playing that Zenyatta. They had a great support line. As for their DPS players, SBB was always on that Tracer, consistently doing insane amounts of damage while dealing with other Tracers. Then we had Pine, who was a hit scan specialist. They would put him in on costs, sometimes other maps. He didn't see too much playtime, but when he was in there, he was very consistent and did a lot for the team. As for Libero, he is very flexible and was able to swap on anything needed at any time for the team, whether it was Pharah, Genji, Soldier, even some tank play. He was always there and performing at a high level. And then we have their tank line starting off with Mako, one of the most flexible off tanks in the league, consistently performs at a high level on all of the tanks. And then their main tanks, Janice and Mano, both very flexible. I've seen them perform well on their Orisa, Ryan, and Winston. So in general, this team is very flexible. The only thing I haven't really seen personally is Arc play some Lucio and Moira. So if there is anything to question from them moving into the next meta, I would say Arc. But other than that, I think all the players on this roster are able to swap to anything needed. So going into this new meta, whether it's tanks, more DPS, whatever, hit scan, specialist, they have Pine. They'll definitely have everything covered. Moving on to the second team in the standings, which is actually the Houston Outlaws. Now, I'm not going to lie, there are some red flags that raise in my mind when I think about the next meta in the Houston Outlaws. Jake is known as being like this one-trick Junkrat player, can't really flex onto anything else, which I think is false. He definitely can flex onto that Genji, the Tracer, Pharah, some hit scan rolls, which is good, but the main problem I have with Jake is I don't think the heroes are on the same level as his Junkrat. His Junkrat is absolutely insane. He is more than likely the best Junkrat in the entire league. So the big question for me is Jake going to perform at that level on other heroes like he did on Junkrat? Because to be honest guys, a big reason why the Houston Outlaws were so good is Jake. His Junkrat play was absolutely phenomenal in stage 1. Now, stage 2, I'm not saying Junkrat's going to go away, but I do think there are going to be some maps where other heroes are a lot more optimal than Junkrat. Sure, there's going to be those specific maps where he is still really good and they're going to use him, but let's also remember the map pool is changing, so depending on what the maps are, we'll just have to see. As for their other players, I might be a little worried about Coolmat. Yes, he is an absolutely amazing diva, one of the best in the league, but we haven't seen him play anything other than diva for a very long time, so that is a big question mark. But I don't think diva's going anywhere in this new meta, unless it turns into like a triple DPS or quad tank situation. But if it's quad tank, I still see diva being played. So other than that, I think they got everything covered. Raucus is also a very good Roadhog, so if a Roadhog player is needed at any point, they can throw him in there. Spree is known as being a very good Zarya, so they can throw him in for Zarya play. So my main worry for the Houston Outlaws is Jake going to be able to perform on other heroes like he did on Junkrat, and if needed, is Coolmat going to be able to flex off of the diva. Alright, moving on to the third team in the standings, we have the London Spitfire. And I'm trying to keep these under a minute, guys, but there's just so much to talk about on these teams. And I know the video is probably going to be long, but all my videos are long. You guys are probably used to it. Now let's talk about the London Spitfire. London Spitfire is one of the only teams with 12 players on their roster. So because of this, I think they are in one of the best positions moving into different metas. They have so many players to test and trial and who can play different heroes. Let's start off with their main DPS players. We have Birdring and Prophet, who have both shown that they're capable of playing many heroes at high levels. Prophet with the Junkrat, Tracer, Genji. Then Birdring has shown that he can play hit scan, Tracer, Genji. All over the board, I think these two have everything covered when it comes to DPS, as well as Birdring being able to flex to that Roadhog. He was once a great Roadhog for Kong Duancia in the quad tank meta, so DPS will be fine. As for their flex tanks, we have Fury and Huyal, who both have shown really only diva. Fury has had some really good moments on Roadhog though. Prior to the Overwatch League, we haven't really seen them on anything other than diva as well, so maybe a question mark there, but I think they'll be fine, especially since they can work together on this 12-man roster. Then for the main tanks, they actually did send Fisher over to the Los Angeles Gladiators, so we only have Gesture right now, which pretty much has shown he is capable of playing the Winston, Reinhardt, or Orisa in any comp, so I'm not worried about him at all. And I'm sure they're going to acquire another main tank before Stage 2 starts, so he'll have somebody to work with him as well. And then the supports, we got Nuss, who played for Meta Athena. During his run with them, he played a lot of Lucio. Closer played a decent amount of Lucio with GC Busan. He looked good on it. Bedosen has looked amazing on the Zenyatta. Hogopen has also looked pretty good. Haven't seen either of them on the Ana yet, so that could be a question. But other than that, I think the London Spitfire have everything covered simply because they do have a 12-man roster and every player is really good. So similar to the NYXL, I think they'll be fine moving into the next meta. And in 4th place, now we have the Los Angeles Valiant, who I was very high on during the beginning of Stage 1. And you guys are right, I definitely have tunnel vision on some of their bad performances so far this season. They definitely have performed at a good level, and I'm going to try my best not to play them down. I was just really disappointed in some of their individual performances and team performances in a few of their games, but I'm going to do my best now to look past that. I do think they are in a good situation when it comes to the next meta. They have a lot of players who are capable of flexing. They have Verbo who can come in on Lucio, Space who can come in on flex tanks if they even need it, because Envy looks amazing on flex tanks. Fate so far has been an amazing Winston. His Orisa has looked good. We haven't seen too much of his Reinhardt, so maybe Numlock can finally see some playtime on that. Silk Thread and Agilities have looked pretty good on the projectile roll, and Silk Thread has been a decent hit scan. Soon, of course, been very consistent on the Tracer, and he surprised me with his Widowmaker. The big question, though, I have for their DPS players, if it does become a very dominant hit scan meta, who is going to be able to step up and play that? Yeah, I know Silk Thread has played a decent amount of Soldier for them, and he has looked pretty decent on it, but just decent, you know? If it becomes like a heavy Soldier, McCree, and Tracer meta, Silk Thread's definitely going to have to get better at the hit scan role. Yeah, they could potentially bring in Grim Reality and give him some playtime, see what he can do on hit scan. But honestly, I do feel bad saying this, but I don't think Grim Reality is that great of a player. I think he's past his time. His McCree was once very good, but just as McCree, his Soldier was honestly never very good. And if you focus on shutting down Grim Reality, I think he is beyond useless. So I think it's going to be in Silk Thread's hands, whether he can be a strong hit scan or not. And that's the main problem for the Los Angeles Valiant. Other than that, though, I think they're in a good spot. Now in 5th place, we have the Seoul Dynasty, who a lot of you guys are probably waiting for me to talk about. And I think they'll be in a good spot coming next meta. One of the big reasons why is because we have Ryu Jahong and Toby, who will more than likely be swapping onto their signature heroes, Ana and Lucio. Prior to the Overwatch League, Lunatic High was always known for being such a strong team simply because of their support and tank play. Nobody really looked at them and said, wow, they have these insane DPS players. It was always, wow, their tanks, their supports, they're so good, they do so much for their team. And in this last meta, it kind of seemed like they lost that. It was a lot of Fleta just being a god and trying to carry this team as far as he could. Sure, the play was still decent and consistent, but it wasn't at that peak level where we know Ryu Jahong and Toby can be. So they're going to get a huge boost there. As for their off tanks, they have Zunba, who can basically play everything. Their DPS are also in a pretty good situation. We have Fleta, who is a very good hit scan, and then we have Wakid, who is a very good projectile. Then Bunny and Munchkin can also flex in on a couple specific special heroes. As for their main tanks, I do think they need to stop playing Miro. He is not the same player that he used to be. He's making too many mistakes, and similar to Grim Reality, if you punish him, he can become very useless for his team. I want to see more of Kuki and what he can do. And overall, Seoul Dynasty are just going to be in a much better position than they were in the last meta. It definitely favors them more in my opinion. Next, we have the Boston Uprising sitting in 6th place. And for these guys, I'm a little up in the air. They do have Dreamcasper and Striker, who have looked amazing. Striker really good on the Tracer, has also shown some good McCree. Dreamcasper can play anything, even off tanks, so he's great. As for their main tank, we have Gamsu. He's looked really good on the Winston so far. And back in the day, he did play a good amount of Reinhardt for Conbox, so I'm not worried about him. As for off tanks, no huge surprise coming into Stage 1. I had no expectations for him. I thought they were just going to run Kalios, but Notes Diva was absurd. And Kalios, who was known in his days playing in China and Korea as a Zarya player, so if Zarya comes in the meta, we could see him come in. Then we have a Vast on support who hasn't seen much playtime. He could come in on Lucio. So it seems like they do have a lot of the roles covered. The main concern with them is, though, that they are so good at this dive meta. If it changes to a completely different meta that could be like Death Ball quad tank centric, they might struggle early on, but at the end of the day, they'll probably get pretty good at it. we'll just have to see. I'm kind of up in the air with these guys. Next, in 7th place, we have the Philadelphia Fusion, who have overall looked very inconsistent so far. Either they're beating the New York Excelsior or they're going head-to-head with the Florida Mayhem and Shanghai Dragons and barely winning. So for them, I don't know how good they'll be in the next meta. Carpe and Shadowburn, very good on the Genji and Tracer. If Genji and Tracer kind of shifts out of the meta, we could see some problems. But like I said, I do think Tracer's going to be here for a while. Genji, maybe, maybe not. He's always been able to be played, but overall there have been better choices. We've also seen Shadowburn swap onto like D.Va and quad tank meta for FaZe. FaZe definitely did struggle during those times though. I don't know if it was his fault or something else. We have seen him on the Zarya and Control Center though, where he's looked very strong. So DPS wise, I think they'll be probably okay. Now for the rest of the roster, I do have a lot of questions. They're off tanks, Poco and Hoppa. I haven't seen them really on anything other than D.Va. And then Fraggy really hasn't looked very good on Winston overall. He's been decent on the Reinhardt. So if a Reinhardt type meta comes, they'll be in a better spot. But he's definitely struggling on the Winston. Boombox is really good at Zenyatta. I haven't seen much of his Ana though. Neptuno, very good Mercy. Didn't follow EU that much though, so I haven't seen him on anything else. Echo, I don't know. A lot of the Philadelphia roster is just a bunch of unknowns for me. I haven't seen a lot of these players on other roles than what they're playing right now, and they're already very inconsistent. So I think if a huge meta shift comes and they have to start swapping roles that they aren't used to playing, this team can end up struggling very hard. They do have a 12-man roster though, so there is a lot of potential for them swapping out players and seeing who's good at what, but that is a trial and error process, which could take a long time. So again, we're just going to have to see with these guys. In 8th place, we have the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, at sometimes in Stage 1, I thought the Los Angeles Gladiators were going to be a very good team, and then at sometimes I thought, wow, these guys aren't very good at all. I do think they went out and solved the big issue of theirs, which was their main tank, iRemix. I think he was making a lot of questionable decisions, putting himself in a lot of bad positions, and it definitely cost his team. So adding Fisher to this team is obviously going to help for this next meta regardless. As for their flex tank, we have Bijou, who has looked good on the D.Va, but there is definitely a very big question mark on him and his hero pool. Back when he played with me on Kagarna, he was really only able to play that D.Va role, and so far in the Overwatch League, he hasn't looked good on anything other than D.Va. They do have Hydration though, who can pick up some off tanks, specifically the Roadhog, where he's looked very good at times, and then they have Surefour, who can pick up that Zarya. So there is potential for their DPS players to swap over to those roles. Then Asher has looked really good on Tracer and McCree. Asher actually has the highest headshot accuracy in the entire league. So overall, I think the DPS players are fine and will be able to flex on whatever the team needs. The big question mark was for the main tank and off tank, and those are going to be covered by Fisher and some of the DPS players. As for the support players, Shaz has been amazing on the Zenyatta. He can probably play a good Ana, and Big Goose is known for his Lucio, so they're going to be fine in that regard. Moving on to number 9, we have the San Francisco Shock. The first thing I want to state is that I think the San Francisco Shock are going to get a pretty good boost going into this meta, simply because Mercy is not going to be played as much, and no offense to Dak, but his Mercy play was completely awful. He had maybe one decent set on Mercy. Other than that, it was just constant mistakes every single map, and he was definitely holding them back. So for him, hopefully we'll be able to see him back on that Lucio, where he has looked very good in his past. And in general, I think if the meta moves more into heavy tanks, the San Francisco Shock will improve a lot. Baby Bay has an absolutely disgusting Zarya. I have first-hand experience with that, and I think Nami is definitely a much better Reinhardt than he is Winston. Dante also had a run as a D.Va player back in Arc 6. Nevix is known for being extremely flexible, so he can go on Hog, Zarya, D.Va, whatever needed. I think these guys have a really good chance at improving a lot in a tank meta, but if it stays similar to how it is now, they're definitely going to struggle. But I do foresee a more hit scan and tank heavy meta, so San Francisco Shock are definitely going to improve because of that. Moving on to number 10, we have the Dallas Fuel. I think the Dallas Fuel are going to improve a lot in Stage 2. Not just because the meta will favor them more, but they went out and they picked up some pretty good players and filled up their roster. They're very close to being able to do in-house scrims. And look at the people they picked up. They got AKM and Rascal, two insanely good DPS players who can now complement Effect. And they also just had a really underwhelming performance in Stage 1. I think it would be very hard for them to perform worse than that, So there's nowhere but up for the Dallas Fuel in my opinion. Now all that looks good for the Dallas Fuel so far. The main problem I see for them is Mickey. He's really only been known for his diva. We have seen some flashes of greatness on his Roadhog recently, but just some flashes. Other than that, it's been pretty average for him. Even on the diva, he's been average lately. So in the off-tank role, the Dallas Fuel are definitely going to continue to struggle unless they go and pick one up before the midseason signings ends. Then we have the main tanks where I'm kind of on edge. We have XQC, who's known as a very good Winston player, and I also think his Reinhardt and Orisa are good as well. But mentally so far, we just don't know what we're going to get with XQC. Is he there? Is he not there? He got banned for pretty much all of Stage 1, leaving them with Coco, who's been just completely underperforming so far. So if they're off tank and tanks, they're going to run into some issues. But midseason signings aren't over with. If they can pick up a good off tank or main tank, they'll be in a very good spot come Stage 2. Moving on to number 11, we have the Florida Mayhem, who really struggled in Stage 1. They went 1-12 with their only victory over the Shanghai Dragons. They definitely ran into some major issues. Starting off with the DPS players, I think Tavik is in general trying to play too many heroes. Now with the addition of Saya player, that's definitely going to change, and he can zone in more on a smaller hero pool. That alone will help them improve. Then we have Logix, who can also focus on just hit scan or something. One of their bright spots in Stage 1 was definitely Manatin's performance on off-tank. He was able to do good on Hog, Zarya, and Diva. Now we get to Swoosh, their main tank, who looked god-awful. No offense, I think he's one of the worst main tanks in the league, and it just shows in his play. He's not comfortable. Maybe his Reinhardt's better, but I doubt it because he swapped to the role during the Winston meta, and he just hasn't had any time really on Reinhardt. So Swoosh, probably not going to see much playtime. Awesome Guy will come in, who I've also only seen on Winston. Maybe his Reinhardt and Orisa are really good. That's a question mark for me. As for their supports, they were not very good. Both of them swapped from Mercy to Zenyatta during the last stage, and neither of them really looked good at it. So a lot of questions for Florida Mayhem still. Overall, I think regardless of the meta, they're just not that good of a team. And I think they're going to have to go through a identity crisis where they just completely forget everything they know and start over. If they do that, I think they'll definitely improve. And last but not least, we have the good old Shanghai Dragons, who finished Stage 1 winless. I think these guys have a good amount of potential to improve. They went from an 8-man roster to a 12-man roster, so this alone is going to help them improve. And going into this next meta, they do have some pieces that fill the roles needed. They picked up another main tank, so Roshan can finally get a break, and they can test out the waters with Fearless. Addo is coming in as a projectile player, so if it ends up being a projectile player, they can finally run somebody on that and not force Daya and Undead, who are both hit scan players, onto it. Then we have Jaguri, who is known for her Zarya, and I'm really excited to see her play in the league, not only because it's the first female in the league, but she is also known as a good player, like I said. Sky will also be coming in, who is from Miraculous Youngsters, part of that one team that many people expected to be signed. So they have picked up some good pieces that will help them improve for the next meta regardless of the changes. Like I said, for the Florida Mayhem, these guys just need a complete overhaul, forget everything they knew, and start completely brand new. So meta doesn't really matter for them because they're just, not that good in general. They need to focus on basics, and then once they get really good with the basics, they can start moving into the meta stuff. And that's basically it for them. There's not too much to talk about for the Shanghai Dragons. They have some nice pickups coming in, and if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a subscription. I do Overwatch League content daily, so every sub means so much to me, guys. Check out my Twitter, Instagram. You got live updates on my Snapchat, so add me there, and I'm out of here, guys. Peace.